Back here, Michael with Sturdy Ox. I'm going to show you a little bit more of the functions of the dash and how some of the switches work and why you would use them. So the first switch we have here is the feeder house variable speed. So the feeder house is the chain that's feeding the stuff into the combine. You can speed it up or slow it down. In heavy crop conditions, most of the time you would have it sped up. A lot of it is governed by the speed of the auger on the header. So however the feeder house is being fed, you want to keep that feed evenly, because that'll keep the combine capacity up, it'll keep your thrashing better. As long as you feed the combine evenly, you can load these combines pretty heavily and do an absolutely fantastic job. I would say New Holland has by far and away the best edge on that. If that thing is loaded properly and feeding properly, it will save grain and thrash grain better than any other combine. Here we have rotor speed. So rotor speed determines a lot your thrashing. It depends on what kind of crop you're in. That's why you have different speeds, and also how heavy the crop is, how hard it is to thrash. Generally speaking, you would run it faster for harder thrashing wheat or whatever it is. I'll speak about wheat because that's what we mostly cut. So we keep it turned up fairly high most of the time. New Holland does not have much trouble cracking grain or things like that, so you can run it pretty high. It also creates centrifugal force, which helps to separate the wheat from the chaff. The wheat is heavier and it'll fly out and go through the concaves a lot easier, and that keeps the wheat down on the bottom and the chaff on the top when it gets on the pan. So you can adjust this if you have dirty samples too. A lot of adjustment can be made by adjusting the rotor speed. Now most of these combines are automated. The automation on these combines works fantastic. So generally you don't have to adjust this unless you are in odd conditions that New Holland has not really ran into, so they don't have a real setting for it. And then you have to adjust it manually. The next switch here adjusts your concaves. The concaves are like a screen almost with bars, and it's what rubs the rotors, rub the wheat against the concaves, and that helps to keep, again, it helps with thrashing. So you get in heavy wheat, a lot of times you want to run it a little bit more open so you can keep your horsepower from robbing your horsepower. You get them too tight and it will rob horsepower. So I try and run them as far open as I can without causing a problem with the thrashing. Generally speaking, in wheat, you'd probably run it half to 9/16 somewhere in there. If it's really hard thrashing, you might get down even to 1/4 of an inch. When you get in heavier crops, that helps load it anyway, so it automatically helps the thrashing when you're in heavier wheats. Again, this stuff is automated. On the new combines, it didn't used to be this way, but now on the new combines, it's pretty automated. You hit the automation for that, which we'll go through in another video, but you hit the automation and it'll adjust those concaves itself. If you plug the combine, this is one of the first things you want to do, is you want to open the concaves all the way up. And then there's a lever in the back, a 2-speed gearbox. Make sure you're in low gear if you try and unplug it, so that you can take as much load off of the belts and stuff as possible. And if necessary, you can go down and manually drop the concaves even further open. But that would be one of the first things you would do, is use this switch to open your concaves all the way up. Another good practice is when you go through a checklist, which New Holland has a very nice checklist online to check off your combine for field ready. You'll want to cycle that, make sure that the concaves are working. This is the fan speed. So this also helps govern how well you're cleaning up your grain. If you're in a light crop, you're going to run that at a lower fan speed because it doesn't have as much to pick up. So if you speed it way up when you're harvesting in a light crop, you'll just blow the wheat right out the back and you'll cause yourself a lot of grain loss issues. When you got a really heavy crop, if If you keep it too slow, your drain sample will get really dirty. The chaff will still be in there. So you want to be careful on adjusting this. Again, there's automation for it, but running this up and down in your post pre-harvest check would be a really good idea, so you make sure your RPM on that thing is right. These next ones are the adjustment of your sieve, and the sieve is the size of hole that is there for the wheat to drop through. So the air comes up through it from the bottom so that it keeps the chaff in the air and carrying out to the back into the field, and it lets the wheat fall through. So if your airspeed's turned up too much, it can make it so the wheat can't fall through. Or if you have it too tight for the type of crop, for instance, if you were doing corn and trying to use a grain sieve, you wouldn't get very much corn through there. You just run it out the back. So you want to have the right type of sieve, and you want to have it the right distance open in order to maximize both the capacity of the machine and the cleanness of your grain. And that determines largely how clean your grain is and what's going to go back into the return. Say you're not thrashing well, you shut your sieves a little bit, and sometimes that will help to keep the grain going into the return and getting re-thrashed, so that you have more good grain to put into the tank. Then we have another switch over here, and this does the front header tilt on the combine, which is you can also do up here on the joystick. So you can tilt your thing. Now, one of the things, depending on what you have for gauge wheels or contour wheels, those things are towards the back of the header. So if you tip your header back a little bit, it'll also put those wheels harder on the ground and can actually lift it. So if you're wanting to just lift a 1/4 of an inch more or something, sometimes you just adjust the tilt on your header, and that will get you the extra height you need. It's kind of like a fine control. But also, you don't want to tip your header too far forward, especially if you're cutting low to the ground, because then it'll run your sickle guards into the ground a little bit, and you pick up dirt. And of course, getting dirt into the combine really wears it out fast. So we have 5 buttons right here. These buttons govern how the straw is spread in the bag. So if you'll notice, you've got one that it'll shoot it out to the right. So say you've got a wind coming from the right side of you, you want to shoot the straw into the wind a little bit so that it helps fight the wind, so you get a more even spread back there. You can do left, you can do right. All of this can be set up relatively automatic too. You can do a really narrow, if you have a small header, so you can do it with that. If you have a large header, it'll spread it out more. So all of these adjust how you're spreading your straw. Okay, here we have some buttons that are really nice for quick things. Most of the function of this stuff right here can also just be done by the handle. Pulling back on this and hitting one of the switches can do most of this stuff. But you come to the end of the field and you double click on the RES, and that will lift the header up. You turn around and you start down the field, you hit the RES, and it drops the header to the height you were cutting at before, and away you go. Now you can have settings, so it's gonna, right now, if you hit RES, it's gonna put it to setting number 2, whatever you have that set at. And then there's setting number 1. That could be higher or lower depending on which way you like to have it. So you can just be going along, and all of a sudden you have some down grain, boom, hit number 1, and it just drops down to the low point so you can get that down grain. Then there's a float, which makes it so that you can drive really fast in decently smooth ground by putting it on float, and it just keeps it that same distance above the ground and lets it float. So if you have a side hill or something, it keeps the header from getting too high or getting too low, and it makes it so that it almost self-adjusts to the terrain, a little different than these being held more rigidly. Then we have two buttons right here for the GPS. So if you're cutting along and you're missing a little bit of grain over there, you can push this side and it'll move the combine to the right. 5 inches, I think, is how much it does. Every time you push it, it moves it over 5 inches, and then it'll hold that mark. And the computer remembers that. So it goes and when you go back into the field, the computer remembers that mark, so you'll be 5 inches moved over when you turn around. This one here moves you to the left. If you need to move a little bit left, you just start clicking this one. Again, 5 inches at a time moves you to the left. So it's just a quick, easy way to move your combine left or right if you're not quite cutting it all, or you're leaving your headers cutting a narrow width when you could be cutting with the full width. Okay, so this button here is your thrasher, and it turns on the combine thrashing. So in order to turn it on, you have to push the yellow button down like this. Now, as a safety, we always do 3 honks before we turn it on. Make sure that warns if anybody's out there on the combine, get out of wherever you are, because we don't want you munched up. Then you do that, and you lift it up, and that starts the combine. I'm not going to run it for much right now. Then once that's running, then this one turns on the header, and you can do exactly the same thing. You can pull it up. It's not going to turn it on right now because I've got the thrasher. This has to be turned on first, and then you can turn on this, and then your header will start going. And any problem in the field, man, you can just bam, these things are really quick. You just hit it if you have a problem, and it shuts it off. So they've done a really nice job of giving you something that you can hit quickly. This right here is the feeder house reverse. Turn it on so it's in reverse now, and then you can turn the feeder house forward. Well, that was backwards or forwards, and that way you can just do it real slow if you plug it or something, or you want to find a chain link or something like that. These you can't turn the header on when that's on. It won't turn on until you turn it off. So you turn it off, and now you're ready to go again. I think that pretty much covers all of our switches. You got your park over here. This over here puts it into 4-wheel drive. And there's 2 different settings on 4-wheel drive. You can check them out, but if you get a lot of jerking when you turn around or start down a hill and then start back up, go into the other mode, because one of the modes seems a lot smoother if you're not on level ground. If you're on level ground, then you can use the one that's a little more power, I think. This puts the combine into automation. This turns on your GPS. Obviously, we've gone over to road mode, a few things, but I think that pretty much covers all of our switches down here. Okay, this combine comes with a load of features for lights. This particular button right here, you push, puts it into road mode, gives you a front headlight and a few things like that. All of these other ones, you can see the lights are put in the position that they are on the combine. In order to turn on, just you're in the field working and it's starting to get dark, you can just push that one button and it lights up the ones that they recommend for field use. And then you can turn on some of the other ones if you so desire. You want to make sure that your beacon light is off when you're in work mode, because the beacon light actually goes off once the combine bin is 3/4 full. It puts off the beacon light, and that tells the grain cart people, hey, he's getting pretty full of grain, get over there and get him emptied.
Okay, these 2 buttons here Michael didn't touch on, so I was just going to show you in this machine. This is the variable vanes, I guess, on the top of the rotors, and you can power adjust how quickly the crop flows through the system. And this is the spreaders in the back, how fast they spin, and adjust how wide it spreads for the chaff spreaders.